All right, we're going live. Hey, good morning to everybody. My name is Stacey Rayos, and I work with Texas School for the Blind and Visually Impaired. And I am a developer. That's kind of a bad word in the accessibility community. Are there other developers in the room today? Yeah, cool, awesome, not alone. Development is usually frowned upon in accessibility because we're the root of all evil. We are the ones who mess everything up that the pretty designers put together. So it's been an interesting journey to get into accessibility. When I speak in front of accessibility groups, they typically kind of treat you like you're from United Airlines if you say the D word. Going to Access U is a lot different than going to a DrupalCon because you're not among people who understand the same language and the same struggles that you have. You kind of want to hide your Pokemon Go app and cover up your Firefly t-shirts and just act normal, whatever normal might be. So when I get in there and explain to them, I'm one of you. I do accessible development. I work really hard to make things usable by people of multiple ability levels. They kind of get quiet for a moment, and everyone kind of looks like, I don't know about all this. And finally they decide, okay, this is pretty cool, and then they kind of want you to fix all their broken stuff. So this is the way this goes. I happen to have a whole lot of years of development, a lot of years in Joomla, CMS, a few years in accessibility now, and I am not a normal public speaker, so y'all bear with me. I only have less than a year, about a year in Drupal, so I'm pretty much a noob here, and I appreciate all of you guys and the experience that you bring to the community. My information is up on the screen. I do work with Texas School for the Blind and Visually Impaired here in Austin on 45th Street, so this is home. And Twitter, TSBVI Internet, I typically focus on things that are technical and related to accessibility in the visually impaired community. And I'm also on now joined in at Usability Matters, A11Y. Yep, so if you're new to Drupal, why are you talking to a room full of Drupalistas? Because I'm a unicorn. I've been informed that I am a unicorn. Unicorn, by definition, is someone who can perform the tasks of a designer, architect, visual designer, developer. And knowing something about accessibility, well, that's just science fiction, maybe just fantasy, I don't know. But what I really am is someone who never quite decided what I wanted to do when I grew up. So I tried everything. I started off my background in manufacturing engineering and management, and I went to 4 years of college to study holistic medicine because, of course, who wouldn't do that? It's a cool thing to do. Programming and medicine, a little bit different, but it's a good outlet. Started working with programming and data architecture, and I started as an entrepreneur after a layoff. I don't know if you guys knew of Selectron, Texas in Austin. Big tech bust, layoff, you got to figure out what am I going to do now. So I was an entrepreneur. I started my own business and started doing development. My sites were pretty tight, having an engineering background as far as structure and architecture, and things were navigable, but I wanted it to be pretty too, so I had to go jump in and start learning how to design. So you start learning how to design and get into Photoshop, and then you're making these really, really beautiful things. And then you also want to do something kind of crazy like, how does this thing function with people who don't use it the same way that I do? I kind of dabbled a little bit then, but I started my life of crime at that point, web development crime, that is. I didn't give any thought to how things were working for people who couldn't use my ability with a keyboard. What happens when people can't see the flashing GIFs that I'm using, or use the navigation in the way that I'm intending for it to be used. I created a bunch of slideshows that were pretty BA, sorry, the room here. Embedded a bunch of videos, threw up alt text-free images at random. I had tables with no table headings, lots of beautiful gray minimalist fonts. Do y'all remember that? So cool, but not usable. And even used animation that could pretty much induce seizures from about 40 feet out. Flash forward to 2014. I decided that it would be cool to get a regular paycheck and have insurance benefits. So I went to work for the state of Texas. While I was there, I met a gentleman named Jim Allen, who is on the W3C Council, who does accessibility, all kinds of working groups. He was amazing, and I had what a Southern girl would call a come to Jesus moment. It was eye-opening and life-changing, and things haven't been the same since. It's one of those moments when you want to go back and redo everything you've done before because it was done the wrong way. So what I learned after attending my first Access U a few years ago, if you guys haven't been to an Access U, I highly encourage it, for developers especially, because you get to be around the people that you're actually developing for. These are people with visual impairments, cognitive disabilities, mobility impairments. It really makes a difference to talk to the people themselves and find out what's working for you, what's not working for you, how can we make it better. And the biggest takeaway that I think that I had from all of that was that they're not disabled. They don't consider themselves disabled. We are creating an environment that disables them online. So that was really a cool way of thinking about it, is if, the environment is set up from the beginning to be usable by people of any ability level, or most people of different ability levels. I don't know that we'll ever be 100% at this point. Then you're creating a usable environment for everyone, so there's an equal playing field. And I also learned through Jim that making things usable is a lot different than just being compliant. And that's kind of why we're here today. I want to talk about some of the ways that simply checking off the checkboxes for compliance is not adequate for usability. You can't have a meeting like this without Spock. So the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. But when you're talking about websites, web and mobile applications, interactive technology, considering only the majority is highly illogical. It doesn't make sense, and this is why. In America, with regard to visual problems alone, according to 2015 stats, which is the most recent that I could find publicly, 3% are legally blind, 11% are colorblind or color deficient, 10% report having trouble seeing even with their glasses and contact lenses. So without considering inclusive design, which is what I prefer to call accessibility, we're impeding access to over 74 million Americans. Now, in business terms, that's a lot of people that we're just basically shutting the door on. And not only are we shutting the door on the business from a business perspective, I believe it's an ethical commitment that we need to make the accessibility available to everyone. So 74 million people is, I think, almost as many people as were at the Pantheon Lullabot party in April for DrupalCon, but it's a lot of people. It's people that deserve the same attention that we give to everyone else to make the sites work. So is this really a problem in the real world? This is a problem. And this is a real thing. If you guys can't see the image, it is a handicapped parking space with a tree right smack dab in the middle of it. This is ADA compliant, technically. They have handicapped parking spaces. Is it usable? Absolutely not. So there's information here that I'm not going to read to you. The slide deck will be available after this speech, but the ADA prohibits discrimination. As you guys know, Section 508 is now adopting the WC3 WCAG Level 2 standards. So we are getting to a point where they're trying to legalize and make it to where you cannot have a site publicly available that doesn't give equal access to things online. Hasn't passed yet, but more people are getting sued. Universities are getting sued. I try not to think about it from just a purely monetary perspective, because that's really coming at it from the wrong direction. We shouldn't do it just because we're not going to want to get sued. This is something that's important enough to do just as developers because it's the right thing, but it's also something that we have to sell to management, and I understand that. So we need to give them the numbers, the facts, and maybe the threats. I don't know. Lawsuits are painful, and some universities right now are having to take down every video they have online, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of videos to make them accessible. That's painful, and that's interruptive to business. All right. So there's a couple of guys that I like to follow, not in a creepy way, but the Viking and the Lumberjack. And they are accessibility gods almost in that arena. These guys bring a lot of humor into the world, but they also give you a lot of real world perspectives, and they can point out some of these things a little better than I can, and we'll take a look at that in just a second. Here we go. These are also additional oopses. There's a sign here that says wheelchair ramp available, please ask at counter. There's no way to get into the building to get into the counter. What are you going to do, knock on the window until they come? It's just pointless. There's also another one that says, watch your step, and it has the icon of a person in a wheelchair going up the stairs. Now, this is a superhuman feat that I have yet to see. Pi arms, maybe? I don't know. So just, give me a second here to load this up, and we will take a look at, oops.
The views expressed throughout this video are mostly furniture.
Uh-oh.
They do not necessarily reflect the views or opinion of the Castillo group.
Patrick Lepke and Steve Faulkner are standing in the hotel lobby.
I don't even know where this thing popped
He
up.
knows how to treat a lady.
A montage of popular Budapest landmarks. Billy and Carl having a beer.
No.
A large courtyard. Street.
Okay, anybody mic friendly?
Billy and Carl standing in a parking lot.
Did I accidentally click the? I did.
Band-Aid or else. Because it's hard to yeah, because we're going to know it's there unless
All right, here we go.
Perfect. And we're live.
They do not necessarily reflect the views or opinion of the Castillo group.
Patrick Lepke and Steve Faulkner are standing in the hotel lobby.
He knows how to treat a lady.
A montage of popular Budapest landmarks. Billy and Carl having a beer. A large courtyard. Street performers. Billy and Carl standing in a parking lot. Title screen. The Viking Jack.
So, Carl, the last time we were together, we talked about accessibility in the real world.
And it's really good that you see people use accessibility features in this physical space.
Yeah, for business.
Yes.
Implementing these features too.
Right.
But what about the other side of that? What about the people that implement stuff, but they miss the mark? I don't mean just miss the mark, but I mean just.
Yeah. And it gets to the point where it's just has completely useless.
Yeah. I mean, you know what? A very good example is this restaurant right here in Toronto. They have this amazing table at this restaurant. Now let's back up. You can see the seats missing in this table before, so obviously if we one seat in wheelchair, it'd be fantastic. So let's exactly that. The only problem is once we back up, we can see quite clearly
A step is shown with no ramp.
a step.
Hey, have you ever noticed how sometimes you'll be in a public building and they'll have signs on the wall to tell you where you are, what floor you're on, what rooms are which one. You see a lot of conferences to tell you where you are. And each one of those signs, they're also relevant.
Right. Actually, a good friend of ours once referred to that as Band-Aid or else.
Because it's hard to
Yeah, because we're going to know it's there unless they know it's there.
Yeah.
It's not like we can walk around through the walls for no reason.
Sure, and it's also really easy to play places sometimes. Hi, hello. Sometimes they're on a part of the wall that you don't even expect to see anything.
And it's not always there enough, so it's not like you look for the implementation like Ariel numbers. Actually, we did actually see our friend Leonie have that very problem this week.
Leonie Watson walks up to a wall and feels around for braille. Her hands slide across to a man's chest. It's Steve Faulkner.
What does it say?
C-cup.
Alright, Bill, so that's really, really bad. But I almost find it comical the way that some places put up wheelchair ramps that you know good and well nobody's ever going to do it like, sure, like you got a Popeye striped arm. Yeah, exactly. And so here's one that I found that I wanted to show you.
A very steep ramp is shown.
Yeah, there's not even like a guardrail beside it. Like if you like me straight one is to the left or right, you're done for. Exactly. Yeah, but the thing is, that's not even the worst one. I have a couple of more. So here's another one. Look.
Incredibly steep ramp is shown.
Remember this one? It was in Costa Rica. Yeah. I thought we were drunk the first time we saw it. But no, we might have been. But still, like, I mean, the only time a ramp should be that steep is if you're using it to jump to school bus or the fountains. As a matter of fact, speaking of that kind of like downward ramp, check this one out now.
Possibly steep ramp is shown.
That's the exorcist of wheelchair ramp. Exactly. Like, good luck ever going up it. But also the narrow stairway between the things, you got to actually make sure that you're identically aligned with the two down. Yeah, right. Because we're not talking about 4, we're talking about 50 foot. Being bad at math is somewhat forgivable. You know, you have to stick around. If you're going down, it's okay. But what about the people that don't even trust? Like the ones that make you install plugin with a website.
Marcus A. City.
In order to access this website, you must download the arbitrary accessibility toolbar. This list allows features you can provide on the features you can from assistive technology you have already. We understand that this has a great deal of time and all assistive technology. But like making our site work would take far too much of our time and energy just because it's not wrong. Instead, we are going to evaluate everything in terms of accessibility while at the same time we work on it. Since this is the last time we probably visit this site, we thank you for stopping by. Please tell us all that your experience with the picture and nothing else more money.
You gotta be kidding.
You know, those people really dig the engine because basically they're modern day snake oil salesmen. Oh, dude, for sure, we are a brand new age of civilization. Oh, I like that. I like that a lot. Yeah. So until then, I'm Carl Rose. I'm Billy Greer. We're the Viking and the Lumberjack.
The Viking and the Lumberjack. Useless accessibility. Billy and Carl are dancing.
All right, Billy and Carl go dance. So, so that's a really good way of showing you how ADA compliance versus usability is failing, and a little bit of how online compliance versus accessibility is hurting people. We don't want to be the ramp that no one can get up or down. So, now returning back to my screen. I have a mouse? Yes, I have a mouse. All right, so these same kinds of issues exist online. There's a lot of text on here. We're just going to go through just a couple of them. The things that I see the most often, even in the Drupal community, text over an image background. These are really pretty things visually, but to a user who has low vision issues, they're very, very difficult to maneuver. And I'll show you what I mean by that. Okay, maybe wrong. All right. Yeah, I'm just gonna do it this way. Here we go. Okay, here's the image of a beautiful resort. This is an actual place in Las Vegas, Nevada, or right outside of Las Vegas. You can see the text fine if you're a visual person. It's large, it's bold, it's contrast. If you hit a color contrast tool on multiple points, you're going to hit 2A passing standards. But for a low vision user, it's really hard to discern that text against the background. So what happens when we add just a very simple banner behind it? It really pulls out the contrast a lot more. If you make it semi-transparent or give it some opacity, then you really don't lose anything in your image. So as a designer, on the designer side, you want it to be pretty, but on the functionality side, you actually need it to be usable, readable as well. This is something that is in a lot of our themes right now for Drupal that we've looked at. Rotating slideshows. They're really pretty, but they're not always very accessible. What happens with a rotating slideshow, and I'm not even going to attempt to do the voiceover on this one, is that every time that slide automatically rotates to the next slide, that screen reader interrupts and tells the user whatever's going on in that slide. Next image, and starts reading the text that you've given it for that image description. So if they're reading down the page somewhere and actually looking at your content, which is what we want, right? they're buried down halfway in the page, and all of a sudden the slide rotates again, and it interrupts. So not only is it annoying for everyone, but for a cognitive user, or a user with cognitive disabilities, it's infuriating because you lose your place completely. You have no train of thought. Now you have no way to go back to where you were and recollect that. Color contrast issues. This isn't just for color blindness. It's also elderly and fatigued users. In America, we have a growing number of elderly. We're getting older and older here. Visual issues like macular degeneration are becoming more and more prominent. As our generation in particular gets to that point, having been computer users all of our lives, and especially our children, this is going to be more of an issue. We need to make sure that we're developing things now that we'll be able to use ourselves when we get there. Unclear instructions or assumed understanding. Combining visual hints with the actual imagery. Yes, sir?
Sorry, I don't want to interrupt your flow, but you talked about how rotating slideshows are bad, but what do we do? Clients always ask us for rotating slideshows.
I know they do. They love them because it's kitschy, it's cute, it shows everything. But number one, how many people actually are sitting there watching the slides pass through? They don't. They click on the buttons to advance to the next one if they want to see the next one.
You don't need to convince me not to use slideshows. I don't like slideshows, but my client demands it. So.
Show them the should I use a carousel?
Yeah, show them the carousel.
Should I use a carousel?
Yep. Thank you. You're answering the wrong question. I know not to use slideshows. I can't convince all of my clients not to use slideshows. There's no amount of talking or convincing or showing that will convince them not to do it. My question rather is, how do we use slideshows but not create the usability problem that you're describing?
Do not autoplay.
So but there's a button that hits.
Allow them to use arrows because arrows are easy to use. Use dots in the middle if you want to so that they can generate that. Make sure that your controls are tabbing forward and backward as they should with accessibility. Within Drupal, that's pretty easy to do. I have some references on here that will give you more details on that. But just don't autoplay that because that way they don't hear every announcement every single time it automatically switches through.
Okay.
I would definitely encourage you to, instead of a typical slideshow, have a photo there with a gallery, a link to a gallery. And the link to the gallery actually opens up to more images they can upload themselves with ease and have descriptions for each image. It's a good alternative for people who are insistent on having that.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Thanks for the question. Feel free to.
Thank you everybody for jumping in.
No, feel free to interrupt. This is great.
I don't want to be mad at you.
No, birds of a feather means this is what I love about the Drupal community is anybody can speak up, and it teaches me too while I'm here, so it's great. So the unclear instructions about or assuming the understanding. One of the gentlemen that we had spoken with there at XSU had autism, and it was really interesting to hear his perspectives on how easily he gets lost in what we're developing. On the left, the social media, having an outline to give you the focus, and I think I kind of forwarded to a weird slide. One sec. Here we go. All right, push versus pull. So this is a simple thing. When you get to a door, it says push. How many of us even still go and try to do the wrong thing? You look like an idiot and hope no one's watching. This is something that's important for people who have cognitive issues or just people who are busy and don't take the time to read it. Make sure that your signage has descriptive images on how we can do things. This could also be used for video, up and down arrows, saying up and down beside it. This is great for hamburger menus. Does everyone know what that is? Yeah, hamburger menus are the three little lines you see on your mobile apps. Actually, you click on it and go to a menu. You should always have the word menu on that somewhere so that you can be very clear about what the intent is. There should be some screen reader ARIA labeling there to let the user know on assistive technology, click to open the menu. Let me go back over here. Identifying the current focus ring. When you tab through as a screen reader user or as a non-keyboard or as a keyboard user, non-mouse user, you want to be able to clearly see where you are at any point in the site. The one on the left is very difficult. It's kind of obscure. You can't see that. You can't blow that up enough really to see that color contrast with the light gray on white. It would definitely fail, color contrast testing. The one on the right is a little better. This is for a user who has color contrast issues. You can see the track marks around it. You can see the home button at the top where they're actually active. And at the bottom, the same. The bottom is a little bit different because that has a series of black and red dots around it. And what that does is if they switch it over to black and white mode, it automatically makes the color outline white. It's done with CSS, so that you don't have to have two separate style sheets or two separate styles assigned to that element. Like a breadcrumbs, we need a clear "you are here" information trail. Forms that do not clearly show which fields are required. This is a big one. I use Google quite a bit in our environment because we have Google Classroom for the students. Google does not do a great job with their forms because you can't style the CSS to make the outlines any darker. So hopefully they can find them by tabbing into the spaces. That's one that we're working on them with. They also need to know what formats are expected. For date, telephone number, give them a hint. It's the worst thing in the world to go through an entire form and get to the very end and it says, it's not accepted because you didn't give them the format they wanted. Well, you never told me what you wanted in the first place. And then hitting enter, creating submit as an action is a problem. A lot of assistive technology users use enter to select a button or an element. If we hit enter and the form submits halfway through the form being completed, they have to go back and redo everything. Using HTML styled headings to get the look of text instead of creating new styles with the text. This is more along the lines of your designer has a really, really cool, bold font, and they've used heading 1, heading 2, but you really like that style. So you use H2 on it, even though it's not even a heading at all. You just want to use the similar style without having to create a new style. That causes problems for the screen readers because as they're tabbing through the headings, it comes up as a heading, and it's really not. It shouldn't be. Developer style key codes in JavaScript. I don't know how many people in here are using JavaScript for development, but when we define our own key codes, our code combinations, that causes problems. There's a lot of things with the different assistive technology screen readers and Zoom text. They don't even agree with each other. So now we're introducing more unique codes to them or things that might actually clash and not work with them at all. And then the lack of captioning and audio descriptions for videos. The video that we just watched was a great example of being audio described. You could hear someone describing what was going on in the picture, as well as having a closed captioning at the bottom. And if I had used it with a reader, you would actually see that there's a transcript available as well. So it takes more time. It is more work. There's no getting around that. As a contractor, you have to plan accordingly and quote accordingly. But it's worth the time and effort so that people who are visually impaired, people who are auditory impaired, people who have mobility issues can actually still use your controls and still see or get the experience of the video. Yes?
I have one question about one of the specific things. Submitting the form when a user clicks enter, whether they're on the submit button or not. I feel like that's just browser behavior, isn't it? If I don't take some proactive measure in how I code up my form, if a user's just focused on one of the inputs and they hit enter, it's usually going to trigger the submit action, isn't it?
It shouldn't anymore. Maybe IE. IE, all bets are off. It depends which browser. But typically, if you have an element within the form tags, and then you have a submit button defined at the bottom as a submit button, it's not going to arbitrarily in the browser just by default submit the form when you're not on that element. Again, when they do updates or with IE, depends on day, depends on week. It should not be the behavior. Yeah, that should not be the behavior though. Oh, sorry, yes, sir.
Question on breadcrumbs.
Yes.
So we use something typically called active trail, which obviously highlights the section that they're on. Is that, can a screen reader tell that active trail is present, or do you really need the copy of the breadcrumbs at the top? Is there a preference there?
You would have to test that with a screen reader to see how it's coded in. Okay. If JavaScript is including ARIA labeling to where it would announce that, then that may be sufficient. The problem is if you have, let's say autistic users, just because that's who I've actually spoken with, If you have an autistic user and they get distracted or they get called away and have to come back and try to find their place where they were, are they going to have to tab through everything to get to that point to hear that prompt?
Okay.
So that's why visible breadcrumbs are actually a good idea. They're not the prettiest thing. A lot of designers are really, really not liking them now because they take up space and it's extra text and just a lot of reasons. But as a developer, I guess to me, it's kind of time for us to take back the reins on, yes, it can be beautiful and it can also be functional, but we have to draw the line at if it's not usable, then we're going to have to make some compromises here on what you want it to look like. And that's a good time also when you throw out the, if you get audited for your accessibility, you could be paying fines. Just saying. All right, the good news. Drupal rules. Drupal is by far so far ahead of any other content management system that I've used. One of the reasons that we are jumping out of Joomla and migrating over to Drupal now for the Texas School for the Blind site, which is over 16,000 pages, and all of our applications are going to go over to that as well, is because there was no community dedicated to accessibility, dedicated to helping one another develop the modules that are going to be working with the core every time. This is something unique to this community. Of course, y'all know that. This is really fascinating to me, so I'm like a little kid in a candy store. Drupal, community, cool. So you guys have really pioneering dedication to the accessibility from the core. It's getting better and better every time they have a new update. The maintainers' commitment to accessible modules. For most of the maintainers now, you're seeing more and more of this come into the issues list. I can't see color contrast on this, or I can't escape this modal window. So you're seeing more of the issues come up that are accessibility related. And that doesn't mean that we, as designers and developers, have no room left for improvement. We really do. Okay, there are some resources that will be here that we will be able to use for accessibility tools. This is no means an exhaustive list. Things that we use, things that I use typically. Accessibility tools for developers. I highly encourage you, if you are new to accessibility and want some code examples, to check out the Introduction to Accessible Tables and Forms. Those are created by Jim Allen, and they're presented frequently at the AccessU accessibility conferences. Also, the color contrast analyzers by the Pasiello group. This is free. It's a browser plugin, or you can add it to your computer. This will let you click on an element on the page and click on the color beside it and see whether or not you're within compliance. The Wave Accessibility tool, this is awesome. It actually tells you exactly what's wrong with your page and how to fix it. It'll give you the standards definitions. When your clients are insisting on something that is inaccessible, this is a great way of showing them the report. This is the problem and this is why, and this is the Section 508 standard that you're violating. Axe is another tool similar to Wave. It just gives a little bit of a different look and layout. And then there's a really cool article for the top 10 most common web accessibility mistakes. And I am going to open this up for just questions for a little bit as I try to get to any kind of code examples that you guys might want to see. So, any questions? Yes, sir.
Do you have the WCAG 2.0 checklist? I can't remember the URL, but they have a very good interactive site that you can pull up, set the level of compliance you're looking for, and then for each point in there, there's examples, code examples of how to hit that.
I think that's at the bottom of one of the slides here for compliance, and if not, then I'll add it before I post these.
Okay.
So.
I found it very, very helpful.
Yeah, let's see.
I can just take the code, throw it out to the team, and say, guys, this is what we're aiming for.
I don't know if you can, yeah, it's one screen here. All right, over the questions there? Yes, ma'am.
We actually just went through a compliance project. You're just about to wrap it up. And one of the things that there was a lot of, unclear documentation on was the accessibility policy. do you have any other recommendations, I guess because you've had a wider range of experience with different types of people that are going to be accessing, what really needs to be in there, what's like minimum versus what we should really
Yeah.
be putting for usability?
The tool that he was just talking about would be perfect for that, the WCAG 2.0 checklist. Let me try to find that up
Single A,
here.
double A, triple A, whichever levels
Right.
they're aiming at, this will, you can go in and set this and it'll.
Yeah. We use that, but I didn't see a whole lot about like the accessibility policy besides just making sure that you have like a person specifically to contact.
Policies, policies are
Yeah.
different.
That's the one that I was kind of asking about.
There's
Recommendations there.
there's the, what is it, UWeb mailing list. There's a higher education mailing list, UWeb, and I think you can probably find it on Google Groups, I can't remember. But this is a very active topic on there because universities are always having to deal with that.
Right.
As to what their statements look like. No, that's.
Yeah, this is not the one. Yes, sir.
So what does WCAG, who does that actually apply to?
WCAG is Section 508. So the new WCAG 2.0 policies are what Section 508 is adapting as their rules. So this applies to anyone online materials. There's a section of it, 508, which is specifically for online or things that are available to the public. Well, it's not just public, it's public-private, government. Government right now is required to do it. Private is not required yet. They're getting more and more close to that. So I'm not sure if that answers your question. It's all online learning and...
So I mean, like, the guy that has, a personal blog, I mean, are you saying that at some point, somebody could contact this person and say, hey, your website's not WCAG 2.0 compliant, and I mean, I'm having trouble understanding because like earlier you mentioned that because I think it was Berkeley that had all these videos,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll be honest, that seems a little backwards to me. They would remove all of these things that are applicable to, let's say, 75% of the population simply because there's 25%, however many people there that could use those. Why does it make sense to remove those videos from everybody else that could use those things just because there's a percentage of the population that can't access them? It seems.
So from a legal perspective, UC Berkeley receives federal funding, and so forever and ever, they have known, as we know at UT Austin, that they're legally obligated to make all of their digital content accessible to the standards that she's discussing. So that content should have been accessible to begin with. The sentiment you're expressing is like sort of a separate philosophical problem, I think, about accessibility overall, but just from a clear legal perspective, the content is supposed to be accessible from the get-go, and they know they're held to that standard.
Right.
So if I just ignored your philosophical point, they didn't have a choice from a legal perspective.
But it's like Title IX, like it's like ensuring equity among all.
This applies to private individuals. I think there is an evolving thing on that because my wife works for a nonprofit, and that has never been something that they've had to worry about. But now, I think because ADA is starting to enforce more of these, they're adopting 508 as part of ADA, that it is applying to private organizations. But I don't actually know how far that goes in terms of.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems like it could have a chilling effect if you've got a small company and you have a blog and you've got 300 articles and somebody comes in and says, well, you've written all these video tutorials, you've got 150 YouTube videos, and somebody comes back and says, well, these aren't accessible, and would you be first to take those down?
I think there's a huge argument that's happening now and happening more as they get closer to legal repercussions for that. Just for that reason, are they going to make it to where, as of a certain date, everything going forward has to be? Is it going to be retroactive, which will be terrible for all of us. I mean, that's almost impossible for those of us who have been in the industry for a long time. Why they chose to take them down specifically for Berkeley was, I'm sure, related to funding, but also that was a call that they made on their part. They would rather, take that action. So
what he said makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, that makes sense. If legally they were supposed to do these things and they didn't, that makes more sense. I didn't know that, so that was.
Well, I mean, again, the law has been there for a long time. Speaking from being in the position of doing web development, it's not difficult to find yourself in a place where you have gotten out of sync with compliance, just not out of any sense of malice, but just because it's sometimes difficult to keep up with all of the regulations, and that's why it's really important to know about all these tools and to be proactive about testing those things. But yes, compliance in some cases is expensive.
With regards to testing, what I was going to ask is, what is a good way to test the content with a screen reader? I mean, should we try to use the built-in tools in Windows and Mac OS, or is there something else that we need to use?
I would use either that Wave tool or the AXE tool, AXE, and those are both in the resources. I'm going to pull over.
Are they actually going to read the content to us so we can get an idea from a UX perspective of what that experience is going to be like? They're just flagging things for us?
Automation is great for flagging, but you do need to have a screen reader and know how to use a screen reader so you can hear for yourself. Any developer who's developing anything, that's one of the first things I would encourage them to do. Learn NVDA. It's free. It's available. It's a good way of just tabbing through and learning what the gaps are, what you're not hearing, what you are hearing that you shouldn't be. JAWS is wonderful. As a state government employee, we can afford it.
Well, it's also free for 45 minutes at a time, too.
That's true. So
all you got to do is remove Windows and JAWS is free again.
that is true.
It's the best way to use the actual tool most people use as a screen reader. Yep.
Yeah, and
It starts a clock with Windows.
So I'm going to run Wave on this right now, just so you can
They
kind of
actually
see.
say it too. I mean, you're not cheating. They say it doesn't.
I downloaded it, so I had time to like, oh, no, never mind, I'll find something else.
What was the free one you mentioned? So what about designers? So if you have designers who are, for them, WCAG is well, like I give you an example. Right now, we have some designers who are designing charts and graphs for a site that has to be WCAG. Well, it has to be compliant. But as part of this process, I'm looking at their data and I'm trying to figure out, how do you take, chart data, some of which is potentially hundreds of data points, and make that into something that somebody with a screen reader isn't going to want to pull their eyes on.
Right.
Or,
That is complicated. Probably charts. Charts are probably the most complicated thing that we deal with. We've been going more into SVG because it's easier to add context behind that. There's
any
also
recommendations, like as far as charting libraries, or
Well, I would go old school and find actual paper charts, and they have a key and a legend.
Yeah.
And you're going to recreate a key and a legend. The similar way that you would do a long description for a large visual component. It's old school tech, but it works very well.
It's probably the most reliable thing across browsers right now, actually, as well, because the browsers don't even handle things the same way amongst themselves.
Wasn't asking you to push back HTML1, and it actually works. It serves the purpose, the logical purpose that you're trying to do.
So you're just saying create a long description that explains what's in the chart.
Yeah, it's a math legend.
But what if the data is interactive? What if there's information about you're not just looking at sales figures, you're looking at
ARIA is probably where you're going to go with that.
Yeah, ARIA, or there does come a point when you have to abandon the idea of a visual graph for non-visual users and use a table or use something more effective for them. I hate having separate but equal ideas and mentality. It should all be in one environment for everyone. But we're just not reliably there without using old school technology right now with the automated technology to make that happen and ensure that it's going to work for everyone. So
And there's not really a single magic bullet. Right?
no.
Well, this is new. This is new for them. This is information that's never been accessible to them.
There is a chart library, but I have not had a lot of experience with it yet. I think it's just chart.js. But yeah, chart.js. So I have not tested this for accessibility personally. I could ask Jim, who is our accessibility guru there, about that. But this is an option that you might want to play with to see how it's working. So there is a library for it.
They're trying to close the line again between like philosophical versus what's actually policy-based. Another thing we ran into was using third-party form systems. A lot of those aren't compliant.
Yeah.
So we had to go through and figure out kind of like what is our obligation? Like, is it an obligation to switch complete like form providers, if that's even an option, to create your own forms? Is there like a recommendation on, do you just need to send them documentation and say like, hey, by the way, you're not ADA compliant and now it's affecting our website as well?
What I hope you don't find that we've run into is when you do contact third-party organizations for things like that, we have SurveyMonkey that we're in contact with is a big one. There's a forms vendor for Joomla that's very, very popular that we were using for all of our forms that we've had to move off of because of the migration. But Drupal does beautiful forms. So, I mean, there's great things there. But I think what you're going to find, unfortunately, is when you call third-party vendors, they're going to be hesitant or reluctant to change it because their argument will be, why am I changing it for a few people when it's already stable for everyone else?
Right.
You're going to have to find a way to send out a letter or relate that to compliance, ADA compliance, or Section 508 compliance. Usually, when people who don't pay attention to accessibility hear from you that you're going to, they're violating, policies for that or recommendations, you get their attention a little faster. Some places are great to work with, and they'll partner with you, and they have an accessibility department already with people dedicated to that, but a lot of places don't.
Would you consider that like a reasonable amount of effort, or do you think that really like we need to take the next step and go ahead and recommend switching over into, like, for example, all Drupal forms?
If I didn't get a response from them that was agreeable and at least willing to work with you on making that accessible, then I would switch.
Okay.
It's not worth. It's just not worth arguing with someone and sticking with them if they're not going to work with you on something that's important.
Yeah.
And you do have options. I mean, that's a great thing. There's lots of options out there today. Yes.
So is there like a standard, so like earlier you were talking about like JavaScript key codes. So is there a way in JavaScript to detect this type of stuff? Like, is there a way to, like, if I detect a screen reader, then I can like modify the keyboard shortcuts so that power users aren't affected, but then...
That'd be a great module for Drupal. To go in and be able to, to detect, do I have screen reader technology active? And it's not just screen readers though, so...
It's a bit of a trap though, that's not recommended.
Yeah.
Because then you do end up carving out separate experiences for screen reader users versus everybody else. Because the screen reader user should be seen as just another person using the site. Because I mean, if I'm going to tab through and I'm not using a mouse and my thumb's acting up, arthritis is getting to me, I'm just going to use my keyboard. And that's me using the keyboard with my eyes. It's one step away from me using a keyboard without my eyes as somebody thinks. So the experience should be the same.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I wish there were a way that you could detect that and then not collide with it, especially during development phase. I'd like to know, okay, so what are all the key codes for all of the different screen readers so that if I do have to create something specific for my application, I'm not stepping on those things as well. I haven't seen a comprehensive list of those shortcuts so that I would know that yet.
And it changes the new version of screen reader.
That is true.
Old versions of JAWS versus new versions of JAWS
true,
versus the new version of VoiceOver or whatever. It becomes a very hairy matrix.
Sorry.
Yes, sir.
So, last question. So, how does screen readers and multilingual sites interact? Especially when you, like, let's say you're dealing with like offshore teams that may not speak English and they're trying to work through some of these things, but they're interested in trying to learn some of this. I mean, what happens if you have like right to left text instead of left to right? Like, are screen readers, is screen readers like English only type stuff, or is it left to right language only, or what?
Yeah, they can set that up however they want to within their screen reader configuration files. On the developer side, always use your language equals tags if you have something in a different language so that it picks that up immediately and it doesn't try to say Spanish words with an English accent. Which is, how most of us talk here, but hey.
If your HTML5 attribute's not correct, it'll do it.
Yeah, exactly. There was a pizza place, a quick story, there was a pizza place that was here in Austin, and they had it in something like Czechoslovakian or Greek or something, and no one could understand what they were saying because he would read, but they didn't have a language tag, and they created it somewhere overseas, so it was just crazy. So, but I thank y'all for coming. I really appreciate the questions, and definitely get in touch with me if you have any other questions after this, and I will definitely get in touch with you for Drupal questions because I need your help. Thank y'all.